Imagine walking through the streets of Tokyo on a quiet spring morning. The trains arrive exactly on time. Businessmen hurry towards skyscrapers. Children laugh on their way to school. Vending machines glow on nearly every corner, and neon lights promise another busy night in one of the world's most advanced societies. At first glance, nothing suggests this country was once at the center of one of history's deadliest conflicts. Yet beneath the polished skyline lies a memory that never truly disappeared. A memory carried by grandparents, preserved in museums, debated in classrooms, questioned by young generations, and remembered differently depending on who you ask. For many Americans, World War II often ends with a familiar image: the attack on Pearl Harbor, island battles across the Pacific, the atomic bombs, Japan's surrender aboard the USS Missouri, victory. But inside Japan, the story is far more complicated. There is no single national opinion, no universal feeling, no official answer shared by everyone. Instead, Japan remembers the Second World War through layers of grief, responsibility, survival, controversy, and silence. Some believe Japan was an aggressor that must never repeat its past. Others focus primarily on the suffering of ordinary Japanese civilians. Many simply see it as history that belongs to another generation. So what do Japanese people actually think about World War II today? Do they feel guilty? Do they blame their leaders? How do they view America? And why does the war continue to shape politics nearly 80 years after it ended? The answers are more surprising than most people imagine. To understand modern Japan, we first have to understand how memory itself was rebuilt after total defeat. Because unlike Germany, Japan followed a very different path after 1945. One that still influences the country today. Chapter 2, Defeat That Changed Everything. By the summer of 1945, Japan was exhausted. Years of war had drained its economy. Entire cities had been destroyed by conventional bombing. Food was scarce. Millions had already died across Asia and the Pacific. Then came August. 2 atomic bombs. One dropped on Hiroshima, another on Nagasaki. Within days, the Japanese government announced something unimaginable. It would surrender. For the first time in recorded history, Japan had accepted unconditional defeat by a foreign power. For ordinary Japanese citizens, the moment felt almost unreal. Many had grown up believing their nation could never lose. Government propaganda had portrayed the emperor as sacred. Victory had seemed inevitable. Instead, everything collapsed almost overnight. Factories stopped. Soldiers returned home to ruins. Families searched desperately for missing relatives. Cities became fields of ashes. The psychological impact reached far beyond physical destruction. For the first time in generations, millions questioned everything they had been taught. Why had the war happened? Who was responsible? Had the sacrifices meant anything? Could Japan ever recover? The answers did not arrive immediately. Instead, another powerful force entered Japanese society: the American occupation. Led by General Douglas MacArthur, American forces remained in Japan from 1945 until 1952. Their mission was unlike anything attempted before. Not simply defeating an enemy, but transforming an entire nation. New laws were introduced. Political prisoners were released. Women's voting rights expanded. The military was dismantled. The education system changed dramatically. The new Japanese constitution included one of the most remarkable promises ever written by any modern nation. Article 9. Japan officially renounced war as a sovereign right. The country pledged never again to maintain military forces for aggressive warfare. To many Americans, this represented the birth of modern democratic Japan. To many Japanese, it marked the beginning of a completely different national identity. One no longer centered on conquest, but on peace. That commitment would shape generations yet to come. Chapter 3, What Japanese Children Learn About World War II. Ask an American about World War II and they might remember stories of D-Day, Normandy, Pearl Harbor, or the Battle of Midway. Ask a Japanese student, and the answer may sound very different. Japanese schools absolutely teach World War II. But exactly how it is taught has been debated for decades. Students generally learn about militarism during the 1930s. They study Japan's expansion across Asia. They learn about the devastating air raids, the atomic bombings, the surrender, and the country's reconstruction after the war. However, one of the biggest controversies concerns emphasis. Critics, both inside and outside Japan, have argued that some textbooks devote relatively less space to events such as the Nanjing Massacre, forced labor, and the exploitation of comfort women, while placing greater attention on Japan's own wartime suffering. Supporters of Japan's education system respond that modern textbooks do discuss these issues, though the depth and wording vary by publisher and curriculum. The result is that there is no single textbook used across the country. Different schools may use different approved materials. Different teachers may spend different amounts of time on certain topics. This has fueled international debates for decades, especially with neighboring countries like China and South Korea. Within Japan itself, opinions also differ. Some historians argue Japan should confront every aspect of its wartime actions more openly. Others believe younger generations should not inherit endless guilt for decisions made before they were born. Many students simply view the war as distant history. For teenagers growing up with smartphones, anime, and global culture, World War II often feels as remote as the American Civil War feels to many high school students in the United States. Yet certain memories remain deeply personal. School trips frequently include visits to peace museums. Students read accounts written by survivors. They learn about children who experienced air raids, families separated forever, entire neighborhoods erased in minutes. These stories are not presented as celebrations of military glory. Instead, they are often framed as warnings about the human cost of war. That message has become one of the strongest themes in post-war Japanese education. Never again. Not because Japan won, but because everyone lost. Still, beneath that message lies a difficult question. Can a nation fully remember its own suffering without also fully confronting the suffering it caused others? That question continues to divide historians, politicians, and ordinary citizens, not only in Japan but around the world. And perhaps nowhere is that debate more emotional than in the cities where the atomic age began. Chapter 4, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and National Memory. At exactly 8:15 on the morning of August 6, 1945, the world entered a new era. In a flash brighter than the sun, the city of Hiroshima disappeared beneath an explosion unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. Thousands were killed instantly. Many more would die in the weeks, months, and years that followed from burns, injuries, and radiation sickness. Just 3 days later, another atomic bomb struck Nagasaki. For Japan, these events became far more than military history. They became national memory. Today, visitors who walk through Hiroshima are often surprised by what they find. The city is vibrant, modern, full of life. Yet at its center stands the Peace Memorial Park, where silence speaks louder than words. Children fold thousands of colorful paper cranes. Families place flowers beneath memorials. School groups listen quietly as guides describe what happened that morning. Many visitors also meet hibakusha, the surviving victims of the atomic bombings. For decades, these survivors shared stories that were almost impossible to imagine. Parents searching endlessly for children. Shadows burned permanently onto concrete steps. People wandering through streets with severe burns, desperately searching for water. Their stories shaped how millions of Japanese came to understand the war. But there is something important to recognize. For many Japanese families, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are remembered primarily as human tragedies, not political arguments. The focus is often on the suffering of ordinary civilians rather than military strategy. This perspective sometimes surprises foreign visitors, especially Americans. In the United States, debates often center on whether the atomic bombs shortened the war and ultimately saved lives by avoiding a costly invasion of Japan. In Japan, the conversation is usually different. The emphasis is often placed on the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. This difference does not necessarily mean the two countries disagree on every historical fact. Instead, they often ask different questions. Americans may ask, was the bombing militarily necessary? Many Japanese ask, how can humanity ensure this never happens again? These are different lenses through which the same event is remembered. Every August, ceremonies are held in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Bells ring. Names of victims are read aloud. Moments of silence are observed. Leaders speak about peace and nuclear disarmament. For younger generations, these ceremonies serve as living reminders that history is never completely in the past. Yet Hiroshima tells only one side of Japan's wartime memory. Because while these cities symbolize unimaginable suffering, another question remains difficult to answer. How should Japan remember the suffering experienced by people beyond its own borders? That question continues to shape conversations across Asia, and within Japan itself. Chapter 5. Do Japanese feel responsible? This is perhaps the question people outside Japan ask most often. Do Japanese people feel guilty about World War II? The honest answer is, some do, some don't, and many feel something much more complicated. Unlike popular stereotypes, there is no single national emotion. Older generations who lived through the war often speak about loss rather than politics. They remember hunger, bombings, families separated forever, the fear of never seeing loved ones return. Many were children. They had no influence over military decisions. For them, guilt is often replaced by grief. Middle-aged generations frequently grew up hearing stories from parents and grandparents. They learned about both Japan's suffering and its wartime expansion. Chapter 6. The Yasukuni Shrine Controversy. At first glance it looks peaceful. Tall trees, traditional architecture, stone pathways. Visitors bow quietly before entering. But few places in Japan generate as much international controversy as Yasukuni Shrine. Established in the 19th century, the shrine honors millions of Japanese who died while serving the nation during various conflicts. For many families, visiting is deeply personal. A chance to remember fathers, grandfathers, brothers, sons, people they loved. To them, the shrine is about mourning, not politics. But the controversy begins with one important fact. Among those honored are several wartime leaders who were convicted as Class A war criminals after World War II. Because of this, visits by Japanese political leaders often draw strong criticism from China, South Korea, and others who suffered under Japanese occupation. Supporters of these visits argue that paying respects to the dead does not necessarily mean endorsing every action taken during the war. Critics disagree. They believe official visits can appear to legitimize or minimize Japan's wartime aggression. Within Japan itself, opinions are divided. Some citizens regularly visit the shrine with no political intentions whatsoever. Others avoid it entirely because they believe it has become too controversial. Some argue Japan should establish a separate national memorial that would honor war dead without creating international tensions. Others insist Yasukuni should remain unchanged. These debates appear almost every year, especially around anniversaries connected to World War II. For foreign observers, the controversy can be confusing. How can one place symbolize both remembrance and political disagreement? The answer lies in history itself. Memories are rarely simple. The same monument can represent sacrifice to one person, and unresolved injustice to another. This complexity is one reason conversations about World War II remain so emotional, even after nearly 8 decades. The war may have ended in 1945, but its memory continues to influence diplomacy, education, national identity, and public opinion across East Asia. And while older generations still carry first-hand memories, younger Japanese are beginning to ask different questions. Not about how the war was fought, but about what kind of future their country should build. That future may look very different from the Japan the world once feared. And understanding it requires looking at the generation that inherited peace instead of war. Chapter 7. How Young Japanese View World War II. Walk through the streets of Tokyo, Osaka, or Fukuoka today, and you'll notice something striking. The conversations are not about World War II. They're about university entrance exams, artificial intelligence, the rising cost of living, anime, technology, careers, travel. Like young people almost everywhere in the world, most Japanese under the age of 30 are focused far more on the future than the past. That doesn't mean they have forgotten history. It means history occupies a different place in their lives. For many of them, World War II is something learned through textbooks, documentaries, museums, and family stories, not personal experience. The last generation that directly witnessed the war is rapidly disappearing. With every passing year, fewer eyewitnesses remain to tell their stories. This creates an important challenge. How do you preserve memories once the people who lived them are gone? Japan has responded in several ways. Museums continue collecting survivor testimonies. Schools invite historians to speak with students. Digital archives preserve photographs, letters, and personal diaries. Virtual reality recreations allow visitors to experience historical locations in entirely new ways. The goal is not simply to remember dates and battles. It is to preserve human experiences. Because statistics alone rarely change people. Stories do. Many young Japanese say they feel grateful for growing up during one of the longest periods of peace in their country's history. For nearly 8 decades, Japan has avoided becoming involved in major international wars. That fact has profoundly shaped national identity. Instead of military power, Japan became known for something else. Innovation, engineering, technology, manufacturing, culture, video games, cinema, fashion, cuisine, animation. The world's image of Japan transformed completely. The nation once associated with battleships and fighter planes became associated with bullet trains, robotics, and global pop culture. This transformation influences how younger generations see themselves. Many identify more with global citizenship than with wartime nationalism. They travel abroad, study overseas, consume international media, communicate instantly with people across the world. For them, national identity often includes cooperation rather than confrontation. Yet historical debates have not disappeared. Social media has introduced new voices into old conversations. Young Japanese can instantly read perspectives from China, South Korea, the United States, and Europe. Sometimes those perspectives challenge what they learned in school. Sometimes they reinforce it. Sometimes they create entirely new questions. Rather than accepting a single historical narrative, many choose to explore multiple viewpoints. That curiosity reflects a generation growing up in an interconnected world. History no longer belongs only to governments or textbooks. It belongs to anyone with an internet connection. But perhaps the greatest surprise for many Americans is this. The United States is not viewed by most young Japanese as a former enemy. In fact, for millions of Japanese today, America represents something entirely different. Chapter 8. America's Role in Japanese Memory. If someone had predicted in 1945 that Japan and the United States would one day become close allies, few people would have believed it. The Pacific War had been one of the most brutal conflicts in modern history. Pearl Harbor, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the wounds ran deep on both sides. Yet history took an unexpected turn. Instead of seeking revenge after Japan's surrender, the United States invested heavily in rebuilding the country. American occupation authorities introduced democratic reforms. Economic recovery became a priority. Infrastructure was rebuilt. Industries modernized. New political institutions emerged. Over time, what began as an occupation evolved into a partnership. Today, the United States and Japan maintain one of the strongest alliances in the world. American military bases remain in Japan under mutual security agreements. The two nations cooperate on trade, technology, disaster relief, intelligence sharing, and regional security. For younger Japanese, America is often associated with music, movies, universities, business, and tourism rather than wartime conflict. Hollywood films fill Japanese theaters. American sports have passionate fan bases. English is widely taught in schools. Cultural exchange flows in both directions. Likewise, Japanese culture has become deeply rooted in the United States. Anime, manga, sushi, martial arts, video games, automobiles, technology. Millions of Americans engage with Japanese culture every day, often without realizing how extraordinary this relationship truly is. Two nations that once fought one of history's most devastating wars now collaborate on some of the world's biggest challenges. This transformation did not erase historical disagreements. Questions about the atomic bombings remain. Military history continues to be debated. Scholars still disagree over countless decisions made during the war. But cooperation proved something remarkable. Former enemies can become trusted partners. That lesson extends far beyond Japan and the United States. It offers hope to countries facing conflict today. History cannot be rewritten, but the future always can. Still, one final question remains. What does Japan's experience teach the rest of the world? Chapter 9. What the world can learn from Japan. History is rarely black and white. It is filled with victories that carry enormous costs, defeats that lead to unexpected transformations, heroes viewed differently depending on where you stand. World War II remains one of humanity's most studied conflicts because its consequences still shape the modern world. Japan's story is not simply about war. It is about reinvention. In less than a century, the country experienced astonishing military expansion, catastrophic defeat, foreign occupation, economic recovery, and technological leadership. Few nations have transformed so dramatically in such a short period. Yet the memories remain complicated. Some Japanese emphasize the suffering their nation endured. Others stress the suffering Japan inflicted on neighboring countries. Many believe both realities can exist at the same time. Acknowledging one does not erase the other. Understanding history requires the ability to hold difficult truths together. For Americans, Japan's post-war journey also offers a remarkable example of reconciliation. The two countries moved from bitter enemies to strategic allies, not because they forgot the past but because they chose not to remain trapped by it. That choice required leadership, patience, diplomacy, and a willingness to imagine a different future. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Every generation inherits history, but no generation is forced to repeat it. The memories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki continue to remind the world of the devastating consequences of nuclear warfare. The stories of those who suffered across Asia remind us of the human cost of aggression and occupation. The rebuilding of Japan demonstrates that even nations devastated by conflict can recover. And the alliance between Japan and the United States proves that reconciliation, while difficult, is possible. So, what do Japanese think about World War II? There is no single answer. Some remember loss. Some remember responsibility. Some remember family. Some remember survival. Many remember peace. Together, these perspectives form a national conversation that continues to evolve with each new generation. Perhaps the better question isn't what Japanese think about World War II. Perhaps it's what all of us choose to learn from it. Because history is more than a record of the past. It is a warning, a teacher, and, if we are willing to listen, a guide for the future. As the last eyewitnesses leave us, the responsibility passes to everyone else. Not simply to remember who won or lost, but to remember why the war happened, how ordinary people suffered, and why preserving peace remains one of humanity's greatest responsibilities. The streets of Tokyo are no longer filled with the sound of air raid sirens. They are filled with the sounds of everyday life. Children walking to school, trains arriving on schedule, families gathering for dinner. The ordinary moments that war so easily destroys. Perhaps that is the most powerful legacy of all. Not the battles, not the weapons, not the politics, but the quiet determination of a nation, and of people everywhere, to ensure that such devastation is never repeated. The greatest victories in history are not always won on the battlefield. Sometimes they are won decades later, when former enemies choose peace over revenge, understanding over hatred, and the future over the past. The story of Japan and World War II is ultimately not just about one nation. It's about the choices humanity continues to make. And those choices still matter today.